under the leadership of Xi Jinping as the core of the CPC Central Committee, China became the only economy that has registered a positive growth in the world. Foreign trade has broken a new record. According to our statistics, in 2020, China's trade in goods reached 32.16 trillion RMB, up by 1.9% compared to 2019, in which exports reached 17.39 trillion RMB. Imports reached 14.23 trillion RMB, dropped slightly, and our surplus reached 3.73 trillion RMB. Specifically, we have registered the following features. First, imports and exports have reached a new high. In 2020, the world economic growth and global trade have been under tremendous amount of pressure, and China faces serious challenges in external trade. And despite the difficult situation, China's foreign trade, including imports and exports, have maintained a very positive momentum, and we have demonstrated a very strong resilience. China's imports and exports started to pick up in June 2020, and for 6 months we have registered consecutive growth. The imports and exports have reached new historic high despite the very negative situation, and we also broke the record in international trade, and we are the only country in the world that has registered positive growth for trade in goods. According to the statistics of WTO and relevant countries in the first 10 months of 2020, China's imports and exports account for 12.8%, 14.2%, and 11.5% of the global total, respectively. Secondly, the overall momentum of foreign trade has been maintained very positive, and in 2020 we have 530,000 enterprises that have the qualification of imports and exports, in which private enterprises imported 14.98 trillion RMB, up by 11%, and this accounts for 46% of China's foreign trade, and this is up by 3.9 percentage points against 2019. And China has further consolidated its stance as the largest trader in the world. Foreign invested companies imported and exported 12 trillion RMB, and SOEs imported and exported 12.6 trillion RMB. Thirdly, foreign trade has become more diverse. In 2020, China's top 5 traders include ASEAN, EU, the United States, Japan, and South Korea. With the above-mentioned trading partners, we have registered a volume of 7.74, 4.5, 4.06, 2.2, and 1.97 trillion RMB, up by 1.7%, 5.3%, 8.8%, 1.2%, and 0.7% respectively. In addition to that, China's trade with Belt and Road countries have registered an import and export of 9.23 trillion RMB, up by 1%. Fourth, the format of trade has been further optimized in 2020. China's imports of general goods reached 19.25 trillion RMB, accounting for 59.9% of China's foreign trade. This is up by a 0.9 percentage point against 2019, in which exports reached 10.65 trillion RMB, up by 6.9%. Imports reached 8.6 trillion RMB, down by 0.7%. In terms of processing trade, we have registered imports of 7.64%, and this accounts for 3.2% of China's total foreign trade. Fifth, traditional trade has maintained a continuous growth momentum. In 2020, imports of mechanical products reached 10.22 trillion RMB, accounting for 5.94% of China's foreign trade, up by 1.14% against the previous year, in which computers, home appliances, and medical equipment have registered an increase of 21.4%, 20.2%, and 41.5% against the previous year. In the meantime, textile and other labor-intensive sectors registered exports of 3.65 trillion RMB. Textile products, including masks, have registered exports of 1.07 trillion RMB. Sixth, epidemic prevention-related products have supported the world in its fight against COVID. China has played a major role in international cooperation in the fight against COVID, and we tried our very best and provided products of epidemic control to more than 200 countries in the world. And from March to the end of last year, the General Administration of Customs have registered a total of more than 400 billion yuan worth of goods related to epidemic prevention and control, and this demonstrates the great contribution China has made to the global fight against the pandemic. In the meantime, China has exported 2.51 trillion RMB worth of computers, and this is up by 8.5%. So this has supported the whole world in their remote officing. In 2020, despite the unprecedented challenges and difficulties, China's foreign trade, including imports and exports, have registered a very positive result, and this is truly hard-won. This is a result due to the strong leadership of Comrade Xi Jinping as the core of CPC Central Committee, and this also reflected the strong resilience and vitality of China's foreign trade. And this is also indispensable with the arduous efforts made by the personnel in the General Administration of Customs. Over the past year, we have followed through the guidelines of the State Council, and we focused on stabilizing foreign trade and also increasing China's domestic consumption. We have released a number of policies to optimize our services and administration. We got down to work immediately, and this has significantly stabilized China's foreign trade and improved its performance. In 2021, we continue to face a lot of uncertainties. The world economy still faces challenging environment, and there is a lot of unstable, uncertain elements in world economic development. The General Administration of Customs will follow through the Xi Jinping thoughts of socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era, and will follow through the spirits of the third, fourth, and fifth plenary session of the 19th National Congress of the CPC, and also the consensus reached by the Central Economic Conference. We will embrace the new development concept, create a new landscape for development. We will focus on 6 stabilizations and 6 guarantees and improve our efforts in serving the foreign trade of China, optimize our administration, and serve high-level foreign trade and foreign openness. In so doing, we can write a great new chapter for the 14th five-year plan and celebrate the 100th birthday of the founding of the Communist Party of China with our great result. Thank you very much to Mr. Liu Kuiwen. And now we are going to start the Q&A session. And now the floor is open for questions. Please introduce yourself before you ask the question. Thank you very much. I'm with China Media Group. My question is, in 2020, despite the serious blow of the coronavirus pandemic, China's foreign trade registered a positive growth. What do you think is the secret of success? How do you comment China's foreign trade in general in 2020, and how do you anticipate China's foreign trade going forward in 2021? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. Since last year, China has paid a lot of attention to stabilizing China's foreign trade. Xi Jinping has pointed out to specifically stabilize China's foreign trade to guarantee the long-term effectiveness of China's foreign trade and the production and supply chain. Last year was truly extraordinary, facing unprecedented challenges brought by the coronavirus pandemic. China's foreign trade, including imports and exports, have outperformed its expectations, and China is the first country amongst major economies that has registered positive growth for foreign trade, and this fully demonstrated the strong resilience and vitality of China's economy. So we have not just stabilized the growth, but also improved the quality of growth. Specifically, in terms of stabilizing the growth, I think this can be reflected in 3 aspects. First, imports and exports, and our share in a global trade have reached a new high in terms of record, and after the drastic fluctuation of the first quarter, our economy quickly picked up from the second quarter, and total imports and exports of the year exceeded 32 trillion RMB. This is a new historic high, and bear in mind this is a result that we have achieved despite the coronavirus pandemic, and the rapid increase of China's foreign trade also pushed China's economy to a new level according to the monthly statistics reported and published by WTO. In terms of trading goods in the first 10 months of 2020, China's foreign trade, China's imports and exports accounts for 12.8%, 14.2%, and 11.5% of the world's total. And this is even higher than the best number in history by 0.08, 0.04, and 0.07% respectively. China's trade in China's position as the number one largest trading power has been further consolidated, and traditional industries have pushed the steady growth of China's foreign trade, and China took effective measures in fighting the pandemic, and this has promoted the smooth recovery of operation. And in April, we have picked up the situation, and the situation has been maintained very positively for 9 consecutive months. There is increasing demand for products from China, and textile exports, including masks, equipment, medicine, increased by 31%, and this has contributed to 1.9% to China's export increase. Laptops, computers, home appliances exported by China increased by 22.1%, and this contributed to 1.3% of China's export growth. And these exports have not just guaranteed the demand of the world in the fight against the pandemic, and also supported the world in remote officing. Thirdly, China has a gigantic domestic market, and this has promoted the expansion of the imports. Because of the pandemic, China has further highlighted its role of domestic consumption. And in 2020, crude oil, metal products, and rare resources increased its imports by 7.3% and 7% respectively. Crop, meat, and agricultural products increased its imports by 28% and 60.4% respectively. So these are the three aspects of stabilizing the growth. And we can also look at the improvement in quality from three aspects. The first is that the foreign trade structure has been further optimized. In 2020, private enterprises have registered a growth point that is 9.2% higher than China's foreign trade. And so for general trade, it has continued to increase its proportion in foreign trade, and in 2020 the proportion is 0.9% higher than 2019. And foreign trade has been further stabilized in terms of geology. From a geological perspective, in 2020, in China's central and eastern region, foreign trade increased by 11%, and its proportion to China's overall foreign trade increased by 14% against 2019, reaching 17.5%. Second, the momentum of foreign trade has continued to consolidate, and there are some new business forms in foreign trade. If you look at the cross-border e-commerce, it has registered a total volume of 1.13 trillion RMB, and market-related procurement increased by 5.2%. And China-EU Express rail delivery have transported more than 50,000 containers, and this increased by 56%. Third, the high-level openness platform have further driven China's growth in foreign trade. In bounded areas, imports and exports increased by 17.4%. In FTZs of imports and exports, it increased by 11.4%. In Hainan Free Trade Zone, the figure increased by 80.5% against 2019. So this is my brief updates on China's performance in foreign trade in 2020. With respect to your second part of the question about the new year of 2021, we believe that the world economy is expected to recover, and this will drive the growth of foreign trade. And the recovered domestic economy will further stimulate the growth of foreign trade, but we must bear in mind that there are still some uncertainties. In terms of foreign trade, China still faces challenges and difficulties. We believe, as we embrace the dual circulation strategy, we will be able to create a landscape of high-level and high-quality foreign trade, will be able to form new advantages in foreign trade. And in 2021, China's overall volume of foreign trade is expected to further increase, and will be able to score some new achievements in 2021. Next question, please.
谢谢主持人。红星新闻记者提问。
Thank you very much. I'm from Red Star News. The pandemic is still ravaging the planet. And what measures does the General Administration of Customs take to cope with the pandemic? And are these measures effective? Thank you very much for your question. And let me first address a question that is related to today's press release, and let me tell you that as we speak today, the data that I mentioned will be published on the official website of the General Administration of Customs. Thank you very much for your question. And the General Administration of Customs follows through the guidelines of President Xi Jinping on strengthening inspection on imported food. We follow through the general arrangements of the Joint Prevention and Control Mechanism of the State Council in order to avoid the risk of infecting the COVID-19 disease through customs. And we have the following measures. The first is to put in place strong and effective control at the source. We strengthen our collaboration with a number of international players and our counterparts. We require food exporters to comply with the regulations of WHO and FAO in terms of food export guidelines, and this includes packaging, processing, storaging, and transporting of the food. In the meantime, we are following through the guidelines of the China National Health Commission. This includes the technical guidelines for the production of cold chain food, and we have notified these technical guidelines to food exporters, and we also supervise them in the implementation of these guidelines. By taking swift measures, we can guarantee that the risk can be avoided. At present, for the 104 enterprises that have registered a positive case from 21 countries, they are currently suspended, and more than 100 countries, more than 100 enterprises of this have taken the initiative to suspend the food trade with China, and second, to improve our efforts in risk inspection. For imported food, we take a random test, and we have strengthened our efforts in the test. As of the end of yesterday, the General Administration of Customs have covered 1.29 million pieces of samples. We have spotted 47 positive samples. The rest are tested negative. And third, when there is a positive sample spotted, we take immediate measures to address the situation. When there is a positive sample from the packaging of food products, the General Administration of Customs will temporarily suspend the food trade with the relevant country for 1 to 4 weeks. Already, we have carried out relevant regulations and preventive measures over 39 enterprises from overseas. And fourth, at the ports of trade, we take swift measures in disinfection. According to the requirements of the Joint Prevention and Control Mechanism of the State Council, we put in place effective measures of disinfection at the ports of imports for trade. By strengthening collaboration with relevant authorities, we try to guard against the risk of importing the risk through trade in food. As of yesterday, we have covered more than 13 million samples of foreign food. Next question, please.
谢谢，我是中央广播电视总台央广记者。在去
I'm
年
with
10月
China
呢，
Media
国
Group.
际签署了去全面
In
进出口关系
last
协定
October,
所以
we
想能否请您介绍一
signed
下
the
在去年我国和
RCEP.
RCEP 相关国家之间的进出口情况？另
Can
外，在这
you
个协议这个生效实
introduce
施之
the
前，
economic
海
and
关
trade
是否做了一些
relations
准备工
between
作？
China
谢谢。
and those signatories from October? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. Let me tell you the general trade between China and RCEP countries in 2020. China's total volume with 14 RCEP countries reached 10.2 trillion RMB, accounting for 31.7% of China's foreign trade. Exports reached 4.83 trillion RMB, up by 5%, and imports reached 5.23 trillion RMB, up by 2.2%. Specifically, in terms of trading partners, the 10 Asian countries, they are the largest trading partner of China. The import and export volume reached 4.74 trillion RMB, up by 7.7%. Japan and South Korea, they are the fourth and fifth largest trading partner of China, respectively. Their total imports and exports are 2.2 and 1.7 trillion RMB, and they were up by 1.2% and 0.7% respectively against the previous year. With Australia, total volume is 1.17 trillion RMB, and this is down by 0.01%. And with New Zealand, the trade is decreased by 0.4%. In terms of exported goods, mechanical products reached 2.6 trillion RMB, up by 7.3%. And this accounts for 53.8% of China's total foreign trade with RCEP countries. Integrated circuits reached a total volume of 300 billion RMB, up by 15%. Autonomous parts and systems reached more than 200 billion RMB, and this is up by 11.1% against the previous year. In the same period, labor-intensive products exported a total of more than 900 million RMB, and this is up by 11.9%. In terms of imported goods, imported integrated circuits reached 1.08 trillion RMB, and this is up by 9.8%. Autonomous systems and products reached more than 100 billion RMB. This is up by 1.8%. And for metal and mineral products, the import has increased by 11.4%. Plastics reached more than 100 billion RMB, and this is down by 0.3%. Now let me address the second part of your question. At present, RCEP is the largest trading zone in terms of volume. It has covered 30% of the world's population, 30% of the world's economy, and 30% of the global trade. It has promising prospects going forward, and all the signatories have high expectation on our prospect going forward. The General Administration of Customs is making all the efforts to prepare for the further implementation of RCEP, and we are following through the guidelines of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council. We quickly established a leading team at the General Administration of Customs. This covers policies, trading rules and regulations, and we are making all the possible preparations for the implementation of RCEP. And secondly, we're making some instrumental preparations so as to make sure that the RCEP can be put on the ground. And we also established the methods on the management of products of origin. We streamlined the procedures that we could simplify in the future, and this will bring a lot of benefits to enterprises. And third, further enhance and increase our publicity efforts so that all the enterprises can make the best use of some of the convenience policies. RCEP has dramatically expanded the options of enterprises. It can support enterprises to take multiple flexible manners to select their products. The General Administration of Customs will take measures to help enterprises learn these new regulations and policies so as to lay a solid foundation for the implementation of the RCEP. In the meantime, in light of some of the difficult points, we will do a lot of trainings internally. We will make preparations so as to better serve enterprises on the market. Next question, please. Thank you very much. And with daily economic news, if you look at the general performance of China's foreign trade in 2020, you will note that one particular sector has played a very significant role. And what is your comment on that? Thank you very much for your question. So, last year, indeed, products related to epidemic prevention and control played a very important role in supporting China's foreign trade. And let me report some of the data to all of you here. According to our statistics, in 2020, from March to the end of last year, the General Administration of Customs has seen 438.5 billion yuan worth of products related to epidemic prevention. For masks, we imported more than 200 billion pieces. This is equivalent to providing as many as 40 masks to every person in the world, except for China. So medical products account for 3% of all the products that we have, all the masks that we have exported, and we also exported 713 billion PPEs, 2.92 pairs of medical gloves, and a huge amount of medical goggles. And this has significantly helped the global fight against the pandemic. We also exported 212,000 sets of ventilators and 660,000 diagnose machines. In the meantime, we have exported 1.08 test kits. This has significantly supported the testing of COVID-19. So we are among the first country to recover our operation, and we made the best use of our advantages in meeting the global needs in medical supplies. We exported a huge amount of products to the world, and this significantly helped them to fight the coronavirus pandemic. I have already updated some of the data about different sectors, and I won't repeat that. And the customs of China has taken multiple measures to stabilize foreign trade, and over the past year, we have followed through the guidelines of the State Council and CPC Central Committee. We have taken measures to stabilize China's foreign trade, and in July last year, we organized a television conference on 6 stabilizations and 6 guarantees. A number of measures have been taken to smooth customs clearance and also to support the dual circulation policy of China. And we have many taken thought measures. The first is to further improve our business environment, and we have a number of filing and registration mechanisms to bring convenience to enterprises to improve their efficiency in customs clearance. And in December last year, the average time of custom clearance in and out is 31.9 hours and 10.8 hours, and this is reduced by 46.2% and 86.2% as compared to 2019. The second measure is to reduce the cost of enterprises. And this has benefited more than 3,009 enterprises, and the total amount of loans that we have guaranteed reached more than 300 billion RMB, and this has helped alleviate a lot of the small and medium-sized enterprises facing difficulties in financing. Third, we supported the emergence of some of the new business firms. We have many different forms of tax refund. We encourage Central and Western China and Northeastern part of China to actively engage in market procurements. In 2020, imports and exports of cross-border e-commerce and market procurements have increased by 31.3% and 25.2% respectively, and they have become a major force in stabilizing China's foreign trade. Fourth, we created a new highland for foreign openings. We supported the development of Hainan Free Trade Zone and Liangshan Comprehensive Boundary Zone, and from January 31st to December 31st last year, China Customs supervised the foreign trade of Hainan Free Trade Zone. The volume has reached a historic high, and we also innovated the regulatory systems of China Customs. We have scaled up some of the maintenance and support mechanisms in comprehensive boundary areas, and in 2020, the total foreign trade in boundary area in China reached a volume of 3.43 trillion RMB, and this is 15 percentage point higher than the growth of China's foreign trade. And going forward, we're going to further optimize our policies and solve the last mile issues. A number of measures will be taken to support the high-quality and high-level developments of China's foreign trade. Next question, please.
Hi, a question from Bloomberg. We saw that the total 2020 trade surplus looks to be over $500 billion. That's the highest since 2015. Would you expect the imbalance to continue, or will import demand rise this year? And what would the driver of that be? Thank you.
请翻译一下。
我们注意到，在您发布的数字当中，去年中国的贸易顺差大概已经超过了5000亿美元，这是自2015年来最高的数字。您认为这一个顺差的趋势是不是还会继续的增长，还是说在2021年？中国的内需，进口的需求会进一步的增加，请您为我们分析一下，谢谢。
谢谢您的提问。刚才我在
Thank you for your question.
今年外贸走势的时候
Well, I was addressing the question about the trend of foreign trade in this year. I have basically covered this question. With respect to China's foreign trade in 2021, we believe that the world economy is expected to recover. China's domestic economy will exert effective support to China's foreign trade, but we must be mindful that there are still some uncertainties brought by the coronavirus pandemic, and it may bring a lot of difficulties to China's foreign trade and also domestic economy. But we believe that China has a huge domestic market, with the new development landscape being created and high-level foreign openness is achieved, so we believe we are able to maintain a positive growth in China's foreign trade in 2021. But we have to stay focused on that and keep following the situation. Next question, please. Thank you very much. I'm with China News Agency. What measures has China Customs taken in 6 stabilizations and 6 guarantees, and also in expanding China's foreign trade? With respect to 6 stabilizations and 6 guarantees, I have basically covered that question from many different perspectives. So I won't repeat. So next question, please.
第4排这边男记者。
谢谢主持人。澎湃新闻记者提问：随着我国
I'm with Pengpai News.
恢复，2020年底很多外贸
With the economic recovery of China in 2020, towards the end of the year, there was a huge demand where the export is performed better than imports, and will that trend continue in 2021? Thank you.
谢谢你的提问。
Thank you for your question. With respect to the trend of imports and exports and foreign trade in 2021, I have basically covered this question. In general, whether China's exports will outperform the imports, we have to be staying focused on that. We need to keep following the situation. Like all of you, we have a lot of uncertainties, but we'll keep following the developments. Thank you very much. Next question, please.
谢谢。香港南华早报记者。我有2个问题。
I'm with
第一个
South
话是
China
根据中美第一阶段
News. I have 2 questions.
2017年的基础。
According to the first phase of trade deal between China and the United States, China pledged that in the next year, China will
去年自媒采购目标的完成情况如何？在美国大选还有
by
情况下，自媒采购的进度
significantly from the United States, and what is the current status in the implementation of such trade deal? The second question, can you share with us some of the specific statistics for China's trade with Australia in terms of crude oil and natural gas
煤炭的这个进口
and
供应是否会有调整？ 然后另外
and coals? Will China adjust the regulations of coal imports from Australia as China is decreasing its imports of iron ore from Australia? So what are the trends going forward? Thank you very much for your question. With respect to China-U.S. trade, let me report some of the data. In 2020, bilateral trade between China and United States in goods reached 4.06 trillion RMB, increased by 8.8%, and this accounts for 12.6% of China's total foreign trade. Export to the United States reached 3.31 trillion RMB, up by 8%, and exports increased by 10.1%, and in terms of exports of mechanic products reached 1.91 trillion RMB, and this accounts for 61.4% of China's trade with the United States. Exports of laptops and cell phones increased by 32.4% and 4.6% respectively. In the same period, exports of labor-intensive products increased by 9.8%. Medical equipment and pharmaceutical products increased its exports by 3.7%. In terms of imports, China's imports of agricultural products from the United States reached 120 billion RMB, and this is up by 62.9%. And pork, crude oil, and cotton increased by 56.3%, 23.8%, and 121.7% and 21.8% respectively. Imported cars dropped by 4.1% from the United States. So you asked about the phase 1 of trade deal between China and the United States, and also the trend of China-U.S. trade going forward. And I advise you to go to some of the other authorities as they have recently published some data. So now about the second part of your question about China-Australia trade. Well, let me give you a general introduction. At first, in 2020, total foreign trade between China and Australia reached 1.17 trillion RMB, and this is down by 0.1%. Our exports to Australia reached 300 billion RMB, and this is up by 11.2%. And our imports from Australia is decreased by 4.6%. If you look at the specific products in 2020, China's exports to the Australia include mechanical products, labor-intensive products, and these two accounts for 76.1%
主要进口
of
的主要商品
our bilateral trade, and our major imports from Australia include iron ore and natural gas, and these two categories accounted for 70.6% of China's total imports
对于
from
你关注的
Australia.
相关的
You
一
asked
些
about
对澳的相关的一些情况，
some of
倾
the
向有关
policies that we have on Australia.
请继续提
I
问。
advise you to refer to other relevant authorities. Next question, please.
谢谢主持人。香港中评社记者提问，理事长。
And with
刚刚您也提到说
Hong Kong news, you mentioned that in 2020 cross-border e-commerce
可我请您具体介绍
have registered some new business firms, and can you tell us
的一个发展情况，以及它
what are the overall momentum of
起的作用？
new business forms of cross-border e-commerce, and how has that helped China's foreign trade in 2020?
谢谢你的提问。去年一
Thank you very
年
much
在疫
for your
情的
question.
影响下，大家知道，
Last
电
year,
商作为新业态，体现了一个
under the pandemic,
发展。
cross-border
作
e-commerce
为新兴贸易业
has played a significant role as a new
在
business
疫
firm.
情期间，
cross-border
进
e-commerce
出口贸易额呢，应该说体现了一个
registered
不降反升的一个迹
a
象，
positive growth
成为
in
了外
imports and
贸
exports,
一个重要力
which has become a major driving force
中国海
to
关呢
stabilize China's foreign
一直
trade in
在
general.
积极适应和促
China
进
Customs
跨境电商的发
has
展。
been adapting to the changes of cross-border e-commerce, and we have been
支持
bringing
跨境电商
innovations
新
to
业
our
态的
regulatory policies, and in so doing, we are supporting the orderly development of cross-border e-commerce,
一
and
是
the
全
measures
面
that
推
we
广
have taken
跨境电
include,
商
number one,
出口商
to
品退货监管措施，优化
promote
跨境电
the
商零售进口
a tax
退货
refund related to cross-border e-commerce, and also the return of goods after
全
purchase.
力支持跨境电商出
And
口
we
企
solve
业
the
耐
difficulties facing
优化
cross-border
跨境
e-commerce
电商
enterprises
零售
in
进口退货
returning the
帮
products
助
after
企业
purchase
克服疫情
by
导致的物流
adopting
延迟
some
等影响，
flexible
助力企业
measures.
完善
We have
售后服务体系。
tackled the issue of
二
delayed
是重新
delivery
开展跨境电商
despite
企
the
业对企
pandemic.
业，
Number
也就是
two,
B2B 出口试点。
we have
我们增设了
piloted
9710
some of the B2B
监管这个
programs.
方式。现已在北京等22个直属海
We
关
have released the 9110 and 9810 regulation rules.
从 B2C 推广到
And,
B2B 领域，并
Some of the
配套便
regulatory
利通关措施
experience has been scaled up from B2C to B2B, and some of the pilot enterprises, they can register once and for
便利
all
退货等
and
通关电子化
have
措施。
such services as return of
三
goods
是拓
and
展
tax
畅
refund.
通跨境
Number
电商
three,
的物流通道。受
we
疫
put
情
in
影
place
响，
smooth logistic channels
国际
for
航班
cross-border
大面
e-commerce.
积
And because of the
传
COVID,
统运力
a
受
huge
阻
number of airlines in
海
China,
关总署
in the
及时
world,
出台
suspended their
支持
operation
中欧
last
班
year.
列发展
China
协调措施
Customs actively
支持利用中欧
supported
班列运力
the China
开展
EU
跨境
railway
电商
service by
邮件
introducing
等
a
运输业务
10-point
疫情期
measure.
间，海关支持邮
During
政部
the
门
pandemic,
开通进出境
China
临
Customs
时邮路，
supported
累计
China
开通
Postal
临时
Service
出境口岸
to
15个，临时
establish
进境口岸13个，
temporary
积极
ports,
输运
and
进出境
we
邮
have
件和跨境电商商品，
set up 15
全力保产
temporary
业链
ports
供应
for
链的稳定。
exports and 13 temporary ports for imports.
四是全力
In
保
so
障
doing, we have
双
stabilized
十一等
the
跨境电商业务
supply
高
chain
峰
of
商
the
品
world.
有序通
And
关
number 4, we supported
2020
the
年
effective
跨境电商
customs
增长
clearance
迅猛
of
通过海关
e-commerce
跨
products.
境
In
电商
2020, cross-border
管理
e-commerce
平
has
台
maintained
变放的
a
进
steady
出口清单
growth.
达
From
24.5
our
亿票，
perspective,
同
we
比增
have
加了
identified
63.3%。
more than 2 billion orders,
2020
and this
年
is
双十一
up
期间，
by 33% against the previous year. During the shopping spree of 2020, China Customs
出口统一版系统共处理进出口清单5227万票，较上年增加
handled more than
25.5%。
550 million
达每
orders.
秒3407
At the peak time, for every
增长了
second, we could handle more than 3,100 orders, and this is up by 31% against the previous year and reaching a new historic high. Number 5, we improved our statistic efforts for cross-border e-commerce. So now the statistics can comprehensively reflect the overall development of cross-border e-commerce. We borrowed experience from other countries and adopted the definition of the WTO on cross-border e-commerce. According to our preliminary survey, in 2020, cross-border e-commerce registered a total of 1.69 trillion RMB in terms of imports and exports, up by 3%. And imports reached 1.1 trillion and exports reached 500 billion. Going forward, China Customs will take into consideration some of the concerns of the cross-border e-commerce enterprises. We will continue to improve our efforts in statistics so as to encourage and support the high-quality development of cross-border e-commerce. The last question, please.
谢谢主持人。海豹新闻记者提问：我们注意到
And with Cross Street News, we have noted that private enterprise has become the major driving force of China's foreign trade. And what measures does China Customs have in supporting the developments of China's private enterprises in foreign trade? Thank you very much. Thank you for your question.
刚才我们也谈到了，民营企业是我国第一大
As we mentioned earlier, private enterprise is the largest player of China's foreign trade. Last year, private enterprises registered a total 14.98 trillion RMB, up by 11%, and this accounts for 14% of China's foreign trade, and this is expanded by 3% as compared to 2019, and I'm talking about the total volume of foreign trade created by China's private sector. And they have mainly registered the following highlights. The first is that they have demonstrated stronger resilience in imports and exports. During the pandemic, the private sector surged ahead despite the difficulties, and they have flexible operations. They actively expanded the international markets. They have demonstrated even stronger resilience in foreign trade, and their imports and exports surpassed the general performance of China's foreign trade by 9.2% and 8.3% respectively. But our imports actually dropped by 0.7% year on year. Secondly, the overall landscape of the private sector in terms of foreign trade has become more balanced because the private enterprises in China's central and western region have registered a faster growth than private enterprises in China's east. In Guizhou and Yunnan, we have seen some of the best foreign trade players from the private sector. Number 3, they have become more open in foreign trade, and in 2020, they are dealing with some traditional markets in EU, the United States, South Korea, and Japan, and their exports increased by 12%, 12.9%, and 18.6%, respectively. In the meantime, exports with Asian countries increased by 15.1%.
在支持民营企业发展
So
方面，
all of these are
海关
double-digit
认真贯彻党
growth
中央、国务院
in terms of implementing some of the central policies. The private sector has performed very well, and they have helped create a very good business environment for China's domestic economy. And we have basically taken 3 measures. The first is to take measures to improve the efficiency of custom clearances, and we have a 2-step custom clearance mechanism. Some of the clearance procedures have been simplified, so we have dramatically reduced the overall time taken at custom clearance, and this has also reduced the cost of enterprises in foreign trade. And we also put on the ground some of the specific policies that we have mentioned. We guided and supported enterprises to benefit from those policies. And for enterprises that are in a difficult situation because of the COVID, we extended the duration of payment, and we also introduced some of preferential policies for these enterprises. We also went to some of these enterprises to carry out investigations.
充分发挥海关12360服务热线和海关统计专项调查系统。
We have a service hotline at China Customs, which is 12360. We are also using our public WeChat account to better understand the difficulties of enterprises. Where possible, we try our very best to serve the enterprises in payments, in credit management, and also in custom clearances. So we have targeted measures for enterprises going forward. China Customs will follow the requirements of CPC Central Committee in 6 guarantees and 6 stabilizations. We will take more measures to support the development of enterprises and private enterprises in particular. So going forward, we are going to host a number of releases on China's economic performance in 2020. Thank you very much.